Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Friday, the 1st of February, comes to you from London. And markets rising quite strongly yesterday in the US, so we're seeing that recovery post Fed announcement this week. The dollar still bearish short term and looking weak with these downside targets. So the medium term picture is just turning a little bit bearish. The long term picture actually conversely is turning bullish. So it's a very interesting crossroads for the dollar. And if we look at the euro, we're seeing the euro dollar looking strong on that weaker dollar, but weak long term as well. A lot will depend on these trade talks between China and the US, and that's really dominating markets at the moment. We see the dollar against the yen looking weaker. Against sterling just starting to look weaker against that weaker dollar. So still long-term bearish, and short-term we are now just moving below the cloud. And against the euro, sterling actually also looking bearish on the short-term chart. Against the Swiss franc, sterling lower as well, and against the Aussie dollar, we're seeing sterling bearish here too. Bitcoin down a further 0.75% last night, just still looking bearish overall. The US stock market looking better. We're seeing the S&P 500 index just starting to wander out of the cloud on the price. So we are seeing more and more signs of recovery, holding on to that short-term trend we've seen right throughout January. So the market's actually putting in a very strong effort here. We see several weeks on the row where we've just gone up the hill, so that's looking pretty good. And the Nasdaq 100 similarly just starting to come through the cloud on the price. We need to make new highs, of course, especially taking out the December high. That's going to be critical. That's that point there on the long-term chart. We do have upside targets for for the Nasdaq of about 6%. And short term, we have got 2 and 3% upside targets. So for the moment, the recovery is in train, but medium term, we've still got work to do. And the Dow Jones Index also, we're seeing that as well. The Russell 2000, we are bullish above the cloud. The futures this morning, we're seeing the S&P future up very, very slightly. The Nasdaq E-mini down 0.25%. So we may just see some bull closing at the end of the week with some profits being taken. The FTSE 100 index is up 0.25% this morning. Its short-term recovery continues. We've got upside targets of around 2% here. Upside target of 11% on the medium-term chart, not yet activated, and the same on the short-term chart, 7% not yet activated. The FTSE 250 is up just under 1/3%, and the DAX is very flat this morning, down 0.01%. The CAC Quarante up just under 0.2%, and it's also just starting to show some signs of recovering through on the medium term. Japan was down very slightly last night, as was the Hang Seng. China was actually up 1.3%, despite data coming out of China disappointing, but we are still bearish on those medium and long-term charts. The Sensex was up a further 1%. That's putting India back into bullish territory on the short term, and we'll look at individual stocks in a minute for the Sensex. The Australian market was flat, really hasn't participated in the rise this week, and Brent crude sitting at $60.86, just hovering around the 60-61 level, so no real change there. WTI sitting flat at around $53, $54 as well. So crude oil, nat gas actually sitting at $2.82. Looking at gold, we were in the high 1320s at one stage yesterday. We've got this new upside target of 1417 on the 60-minute chart. We'd need to move to new highs to activate that, and that would break this resistance of around 1350, 1380. So really significant. Gold looking still pretty bullish despite pulling back a bit this morning. Silver also looking pretty strong on the charts, and US 10-year yields sinking lower after that Fed announcement this week to 2.63%. So bond yields coming under pressure, which means bond prices are rising, and we're seeing in Europe the German Bund looking bullish on all three timeframes now. Taking a look at the individual stocks, this data coming to you from Yahoo Finance. And we can just look at the individual stocks here. We see Alphabet was up 2.5%. Amazon was up 2.9%. They reported strong results last night after the close, but a warning on outlook, so that might have hit the shares. We're seeing Apple down 0.7%. Facebook was up a massive 10% after their results, so that's really put them back in the game, unwinding some of the downside targets that we've seen on Facebook. So it'll be interesting to see. We're seeing a recovery in the medium-term chart here, so that's quite interesting to see. Looking at some of the other stocks, Tesla were down 0.5%. They continue to just struggle, and Netflix down 0.3%, but still looking pretty good on the medium and long-term charts. Taking a look at the Aussie market, we saw it's been fairly flat. We had Pilbara Minerals up 6%. On the other side of the coin, Syrah Resources continues to struggle down a further 8%. So they've had a terrible week, as we see showing up in the candle here. China, we had a fairly strong showing in the market, and so that's showing a lot of green. Hang Seng, similar, and the Nifty 50, we talked about the Indian market looking pretty good. We had Hero Motor Corp up 7% this morning, so that's pretty strong. Maruti Suzuki up 5%. That chart not looking quite as good. And Indiabulls Housing has had a terrible time, but we see them up 3%. A lot of volatility showing up in their price, but not enough to really change the chart. And that, look at that relative performance, still pretty bad. Looking at the downside, we see here the live prices just coming in here from Yahoo. We see Vedanta up a massive 17% after a terrible week again for them. So we are just seeing, down 17%. So that ending a terrible week for them. And we see Yes Bank, another feature, a lot of volatility, looking like they were trying to recover, but then a terrible week showing up here as well. Of course, you can do this on any company you want. So we hear the long term, the medium term, and the short term charts. Taking a quick look at the Nikkei, it was again lots of greens, so we saw quite good improvements there. Over to Europe now. And the FTSE 100, the leaders this morning, Melrose Group, Burberry, up 1.8%. We're seeing Rolls-Royce there as well. Not many stocks falling. Shell, after their results yesterday, we're just seeing that kicking in. But overall, it's stocks up this morning. We see the prices coming in there as well. FTSE 250, much the same picture here. We've got some pretty good results in the Amigo Holdings, Ferex Pro, and then looking to the Euro Stock 600, we're seeing here it's AB Electrolux is the leader, JC Deco in Paris, and then Danske Bank. So we are seeing quite a lot of stocks up. Significant amounts, 8%, 7%, and then if we look at the downside in Europe, we have got a few still down, but that laggard board is not as bad, so it's outweighed by the leaderboard. So it looks like a relatively good end to the week for Europe. That's it for today. Until Monday, happy charting. See you then.